Hey there, hello and welcome. I'm so glad you've joined me for day number 274. Today the Lord is reminding us that we're His children, children of the King, and we will be reminded to believe fully in Him. Today we read 2 Chronicles 26 and 27, Ecclesiastes 3, and Matthew 17. So let's turn to 2 Chronicles 26. King Joash didn't end so well, did he? He killed Jehoiadah's son, Zechariah. When Jesus mentioned killing prophets A through Z, that Zechariah is the Z that he mentioned by name. Time and time again, Judah's kings needed to learn not to be proud, and that certainly happened to Joash's son Amaziah, who was assassinated like his father. 2 Chronicles 26. All the people of Judah chose Amaziah's 16-year-old son Uzziah to succeed his father as king. Parentheses. It was after the death of Amaziah that Uzziah captured Elath and rebuilt the city. End parentheses. Uzziah became king at the age of 16, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 52 years. His mother was Jecoliah from Jerusalem. Following the example of his father, he did what was pleasing to the Lord. As long as Zechariah, his religious adviser, was living, he served the Lord faithfully, and God blessed him. Uzziah went to war with the Philistines. He tore down the cities of Gath, Jamnia, and Ashdod, and built fortified cities near Ashdod and in the rest of Philistia. God helped him defeat the Philistines, the Arabs living in Gur-Baal, and the Meunites. The Ammonites paid tribute to Uzziah, and he became so powerful that his fame spread even to Egypt. Uzziah strengthened the fortifications of Jerusalem by building towers at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and where the wall turned. He also built fortified towers in the open country and dug many cisterns, because he had large herds of livestock in the western foothills and plains. Because he loved farming, he encouraged the people to plant vineyards in the hill country and to farm the fertile land. He had a large army ready for battle. His records were kept by his secretaries Jeiel and Maaseiah under the supervision of Hananiah, a member of the king's staff. The army was commanded by 2,600 officers. Under them were 307,500 soldiers able to fight effectively for the king against his enemies. Uzziah supplied the army with shields, spears, helmets, coats of armor, bows and arrows, and stones for slinging. In Jerusalem, his inventors made equipment for shooting arrows and for throwing large stones from the towers and corners of the city wall. But when King Uzziah became strong, he grew arrogant, and this led to his downfall. He defied the Lord his God by going into the temple to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah the priest, accompanied by 80 strong and courageous priests, followed the king to resist him. They said, "Uzziah, you have no right to burn incense to the Lord. Only the priests who are descended from Aaron have been consecrated to do this. Leave this holy place. You have offended the Lord God, and you no longer have his blessing." Uzziah was standing there in the temple beside the incense altar and was holding an incense burner. He became angry with the priests, and immediately a dreaded skin disease broke out on his forehead. Azariah and the other priests stared at the king's forehead in horror and then forced him to leave the temple. He hurried to get out, because the Lord had punished him. For the rest of his life, King Uzziah was ritually unclean because of his disease. Unable to enter the temple again, he lived in his own house, relieved of all duties, while his son Jotham governed the country. The prophet Yesaiah, son of Amoz, recorded all the other things that King Uzziah did during his reign. Uzziah died and was buried in the royal burial ground, but because of his disease he was not buried in the royal tombs. His son Jotham succeeded him as king. 2 Chronicles 27. Jotham became king at the age of 25, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. He did what was pleasing to the Lord, just as his father had done, but unlike his father, he did not sin by burning incense in the temple. The people, however, went on sinning. It was Jotham who built the north gate of the temple and did extensive work on the city wall in the area of Jerusalem called Ophel. In the mountains of Judah he built cities, and in the forests he built forts and towers. He fought against the king of Ammon and his army, and defeated them. Then he forced the Ammonites to pay him the following tribute each year for 3 years: 4 tons of silver, 50,000 bushels of wheat, and 50,000 bushels of barley. Jotham grew powerful because he faithfully obeyed the Lord his God. The other events of Jotham's reign, his wars, and his policies are all recorded in the history of the kings of Israel and Judah. Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. He died and was buried in David's city, and his son Ahaz succeeded him as king. Let's turn now to Ecclesiastes 3. Chapter 2 ended with a significant conclusion or two. Verses 24 through 26. The best thing we can do is eat and drink and enjoy what we have earned, and yet I realized that even this comes from God. How else could you have anything to eat or enjoy yourself at all? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness to those who please Him, but He makes sinners work, earning and saving, so that what they get can be given to those who please Him. It's all useless. It's like chasing the wind. Ecclesiastes 3. Everything that happens in the world happens at the time God chooses. He sets the time for birth and the time for death, the time for planting and the time for pulling up, the time for killing and the time for healing, the time for tearing down and the time for building. He sets the time for sorrow and the time for joy, the time for mourning and the time for dancing, the time for making love and the time for not making love, the time for kissing and the time for not kissing. He sets the time for finding and the time for losing, the time for saving and the time for throwing away, the time for tearing and the time for mending, the time for silence and the time for talk. He sets the time for love and the time for hate, the time for war and the time for peace. What do we gain from all our work? I know the heavy burdens that God has laid on us. He has set the right time for everything. He has given us a desire to know the future, but He never gives us the satisfaction of fully understanding what He does. So I realize that all we can do is be happy and do the best we can while we are still alive. All of us should eat and drink and enjoy what we have worked for. It's God's gift. I know that everything God does will last forever. You can't add anything to it or take anything away from it. And one thing God does is to make us stand in awe of Him. Whatever happens or can happen has already happened before. God makes the same thing happen again and again. In addition, I have also noticed that in this world you find wickedness where justice and right ought to be. I told myself, God is going to judge the righteous and the evil alike, because every action will happen at its own set time. I decided that God is testing us to show us that we are no better than animals. After all, the same fate awaits human beings and animals alike. One dies just like the other. They are the same kind of creature. A human being is no better off than an animal because life has no meaning for either. They are both going to the same place, the dust. They both came from it. They will both go back to it. How can anyone be sure that the human spirit goes upward while an animal's spirit goes down into the ground? So I realized then that the best thing we can do is enjoy what we have worked for. There is nothing else we can do. There is no way for us to know what will happen after we die. Let's turn now to Matthew 17. Yesterday we heard the words that remind me of Jim Elliot's words. His famous quote is, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." With that quote in mind, and leading to chapter 17, let's listen to the last 5 verses of chapter 16. Matthew 16, starting at verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If any of you want to come with me, you must forget yourself, carry your cross, and follow me. For if you want to save your own life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. Will you gain anything if you win the whole world but lose your own life? Of course not. There is nothing you can give to regain your life. For I, the Son of Man, will come with my angels in the glory of my Father, and will judge all people according to their deeds. I assure you that there are some here who will not die until they have seen me, the victorious Son of Man, coming to rule as King." Matthew 17. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and the brothers of James and John, and led them up a high mountain where they were alone. As they looked on, a change came over Jesus. His face was shining like the sun, and his clothes were dazzling white. Then the 3 disciples saw Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. So Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "Lord, how good it is that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was talking, a shining cloud came over them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my own dear Son, with whom I am pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard the voice, they were so terrified that they threw themselves face downward on the ground. Jesus came to them and touched them. He said, "Get up, don't be afraid." So they looked up and saw no one there but Jesus. As they came down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Don't tell anyone about this vision you have seen until I, the Son of Man, have been raised from death." Then the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah has to come first?" Jesus answered, Elijah is indeed coming first, and he will get everything ready. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and people did not recognize him, but treated him just as they pleased. In the same way they will also mistreat me, the Son of Man." Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. When they returned to the crowd, a man came to Jesus, knelt before him, and said, "Sir, have mercy on my son. He is an epileptic and has such terrible attacks that he often falls in the fire or into water. I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him." Jesus answered, "How unbelieving and wrong you people are! How long must I stay with you? How long do I have to put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus gave a command to the demon, and it went out of the boy, and at that very moment he was healed. Then we disciples came to Jesus in private and asked him, "Why couldn't we drive the demon out?" Jesus answered, "It was because you don't fully believe in me. I assure you that if your belief in me was no bigger than a mustard seed, you could say to this hill, 'Go from here to there,' and it would go. You could do anything." When we disciples all came together in Galilee, Jesus said to us, "I, the Son of Man, am about to be handed over to those who will kill me, but 3 days later I will be raised to life." Hearing this, we became very sad. When Jesus and we disciples came to Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked, "Does your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," Peter replied. Then he went into the house, but before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, "What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered?" Peter replied, "They tax the people they have conquered, of course." "Well then," replied Jesus, "that means the citizens don't have to pay. But we don't want to offend these people, so go to the lake and drop in a line, pull up the first fish you hook, and in its mouth you will find a coin worth enough for my temple tax and yours. Take it and pay them our taxes." Let me start us out in prayer. Lord Jesus, please pick us to go up the mountain with you. May we see your glory as the Son of Man. May we catch the vision there, not of your departure, but of your return. Even in the midst of an unbelieving generation, may our mountaintop vision help us to fully believe in you and long for your return. Our belief in you should be so much bigger than a mustard seed, because of all we read in our Bibles that was yet unknown to the disciples. We believe. Help our unbelief. Help us to have the same kind of simple trust that Peter did when he threw the baited hook into the water. We thank you that through our union with you, we are now citizens of the kingdom. We're not conquered foreigners. In fact, joined with you, we are king's kids.